Listen to the story of Let's Begin Here. It all happened in Lexington and Concord. Be sure you look on the Canvas page to see who's who, the American side, the British side, to help you understand the story while I'm reading it. Virginia. The first England's 13 American colonies was settled in 1607. America had accepted the English rule for about 160 years. When England began taxing the colonists in the 1760s, America protested, most violently in Massachusetts. On December 16, 1773, a mob, directed by Samuel Adams, destroyed the British tea into the Boston Harbor during an incident known as the Boston Tea Party. 3 months later, in March 1774, John Hancock of Boston proposed that the colonies break free from Britain and become the United States of America. Across the colonies, local militias, which are emergency troops, prepared for possible war with England. On April 4th, 1775, General Thomas Gage, Royal Governor of Massachusetts, received secret orders. British leaders, including King George III, wanted him to strike out against the Massachusetts rebels. Gage sent out a 700-man army under the Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith on the night of April 18th. The troops were to arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock in Lexington, Massachusetts, then to destroy the American military supplies at the nearby Concord. The colonists, who were cowards, would run away from the fight, predicted by one of Gage's officers, Major John Pitcairn. Americans themselves weren't so sure if they could face up to the mighty British Army. On April 18, 1775, at 9:30 p.m., Paul Revere, a Boston silversmith and a messenger for the Patriots, received an urgent request to visit Dr. Joseph Warren's home. Upon Paul's arrival, Dr. Warren assigns him a double mission. He must warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock in Lexington, and then the Patriots in Concord, that the British are coming. How does Dr. Warren know that the British plan to invade Lexington and Concord? General Gage's American wife may have told him. Margaret Kemble Gage, who is from New Jersey, opposes any action that may hurt her native country and may have betrayed her husband's scheme. On April 18, 1775, at 10 p.m., before leaving Boston, Revere stops by a friend's house and tells him, 2 lanterns. The friends hang 2 lanterns in the steeple on the Old North Church, signaling Patriots in the area and that the British are leaving Boston by boat before marching inland. If the British were leaving by land, Paul would have ordered one more lantern placed in that steeple. I've ordered only 1 lantern placed in that steeple. Paul sets out on his journey from Boston to Lexington. The nearly full moon lights the way as the 2 friends row. Paul across the Charles River to Charleston. There, the 40-year-old silversmith borrows a fast horse named Brown Beauty and begins the 13-mile ride to Lexington. Near Cambridge, 2 British officers suddenly bolt out from behind a huge tree and try to capture Paul. Brown Beauty is too fast for them, though, and Paul is a skilled rider, too. He guides the powerful mare onto another road. The 2 officers chase him, but they are soon left far behind. There he's galloping. On he gallops, warning people along the way that the British are coming. April 19, 1775. 12 a.m., Paul reaches Lexington and bangs on the door of the house where Hancock and Adams are staying. Guards outside the house tell Paul to stop making so much noise. Noise, yells Paul. You'll have enough noise before long. The regulars are coming. Regulars, redcoats, and lobster backs are what the Americans call the British troops. Adams and Hancock are awake. Let him in, Hancock tells the guards. Thanks to Revere's warning, Adams and Hancock flee by the carriage. Meanwhile, a bell is rung to call Lexington's militiamen to arms. April 19, 1775, 1 a.m. Having completed his half of the mission, Paul Revere heads for Concord. Along the way, he meets Dr. Samuel Prescott, who is riding home after visiting his fiancée. Prescott offers to help spread the alarm to Concord. This proves to be a stroke of luck. Paul Revere never gets to Concord for the British troops block his way, but Prescott jumps his horse over a stone wall to elude the redcoats. The young doctor rides through the woods and the swamplands and enter Concord by 2 in the morning. Following Dr. Prescott's warning, Concord's alarm is sounded. As the bell tolls, townspeople hid the military supplies in barns and homes, and the Concord's militiamen prepare to fight. On April 19, 1775, about 5 a.m., the men of Lexington had been waiting for more than 4 hours for the redcoats. Finally, near sunrise, a lookout gallops into Lexington shouting, "The Lobsterbacks are down the road!" Within minutes, about 70 Lexington militiamen gather on Lexington Green, summoned by their town drummer. Instead of uniforms, the men on the field wear farm clothes. Instead of army weapons, they are carrying old hunting muskets. Some are teenagers, like the 19-year-old drummer William Diamond. Others, such as the 62-year-old Robert Monroe, are rather old to fight. There are several pairs of fathers and sons. One soldier, Prince Estabrook, is a slave who has been promised his freedom if he helps to fight the British. The men awaiting the British. The men awaiting the British have one thing in common. They are scared, for they're about to face an army from the world's strongest nation. "Stand your guard," the leader of Lexington militia, Captain John Parker, reportedly tells his men. "Don't fire unless fired upon. But if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." At about 5:20 in the morning, an advance party led by Major John Pitcairn, the officer who boasted that the Americans would run away, approaches Lexington Green. "Disperse, ye rebels, disperse in the name of the king," Pitcairn yells at the Americans. "Lay down your arms." Facing the guns of several hundreds of redcoats, Captain Parker decides to back down. He tells his men to go home, but to remain armed. Most of the men start walking away. A few don't. Captain Parker's cousin, Jonas Parker, a grandfather who has vowed never to flee from the British, stands his ground. So does 62-year-old Robert Monroe. Suddenly, a shot rings out, from which side is unknown. Moments later, the redcoats let loose of gunfire. Robert Monroe is shot to death where he stood. Jonas Parker is wounded, but true to his vow, fires his musket from the ground until killed by a bayonet thrust. Jonathan Harrington, walking home, is shot near his doorstep. He crawls a few yards and dies in front of his horrified wife and son. The Battle of Lexington lasts just 10 minutes. In all, 8 Americans die and 10 are wounded in the first battle of the Revolutionary War. Several Americans have returned enemy fire, wounding Major Pitcairn in the finger and another British soldier in the leg. Following the battle, the entire British force meets up and heads to Concord, 5 miles to the west. They expect that most of the Americans will run away there too. On April 19, 1775, 7 a.m., 90 minutes after the Lexington battle, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith leads his full force of 700 redcoats into Concord. There, the several hundred troops commanded by 65-year-old Colonel James Barrett are terrified, as the Lexington men had been. 1, 2, 3 hours pass. The Americans only stand and watch the sea of redcoats taking over their town, seizing the weapons and the gunpowder. April 19th, 1775, about 10 a.m. A loud cloud of smoke from fires from the British have rise over Concord. The smoke above their town stirs something in the American hearts. "Will you let them burn down the town?" One man asks Colonel Barnett. Colonel Barnett orders his troop to advance towards the 100 redcoats guarding the Concord's north bridge. The Americans are about 200 feet away when the British fire at them. 2 Americans are killed and several are wounded, but this time the Americans don't run. "Fire, fine fellow soldiers, for God's sake, fire!" shouts the American officer. "Fire, fire, fire, fire!" the Americans along the bridge yell. The Americans opened fire, killing or wounding about 15 redcoats. Astonished that the colonists have fought back and seeing more Americans pouring into the Concord, the whole British force begins retreating towards Boston. But the Americans aren't finished. They pursue the redcoats, shooting at them from behind the trees and the stone walls. News of the American defeat at Lexington has spread. The militia units pour in from far and wide, seeking revenge. It seemed as if the men came down from the clouds, a British survivor later writes. About 3,600 patriots from 40 towns joined the fight, turning the road into a 20-mile-long battlefield. Near Lexington, a group of Americans with a special score to settle, Captain John Parker and his remaining men lie in wait. One of them takes aim at the British leader, Lieutenant Colonel Smith, and wounds him. Some of the fiercest fighting occurs at the town of Menotomy. There are groups of redcoats, rushes 70-year-old Samuel Whitmore as he fires at them from behind a stone wall. Whitmore brings down 3 more redcoats before the British shoot him in the head and stab him 13 times with the bayonets. Amazingly, he survives and lives to the age of 96. April 19th, 1775, 7 p.m. The British finally limp into the Boston area. They have suffered a devastating defeat. Nearly 300 redcoats have been killed or wounded. The colonists have suffered about 100 casualties at the Battle of Concord, the first American triumph of the Revolutionary War. The battles of Lexington and Concord did more than begin the Revolutionary War. They showed England and the rest of the world that the Americans would fight for their freedom. The battles were also bloody reminders that achieving independence would cost many lives. Winning the war took 8 years. Finally, on September 3rd, 1783, the United States and Britain signed the Treaty of Paris. Britain recognized that the independence of the United States and ending the war had begun one spring morning at Lexington and Concord. And these are all the American side and British side. This is also on your Canvas page, so kind of tells you. All right. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.